This is Nightly Business Report with Sue Herrera and Bill Griffin.
Critical point. Hiring remains strong as more Americans decide to enter the workforce, but is it enough to ease the intense labor shortage?
Digging in, the U.S. and China levy tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods, and there may be more to come.
Fungus to fixtures. Meet the entrepreneur who's manufacturing mushrooms into lampshades, creating what is literally a bright idea. Those stories and much more tonight on Nightly Business Report for this Friday, July the 6th.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Friday. On a day when a trade war breaks out, you'd expect the market to be down, but not today. And for that, you can thank the jobs report. Hiring was steady. The economy added more jobs than expected last month, extending what has been the longest continuous job expansion on record. The unemployment rate rose to 4%, but the increase was for the right reason. More people entered the workforce, and that seemed to please both Wall Street and Main Street, at least for now. Steve Leisman starts us off with the details tonight.
A strong jobs report for June cooling several concerns for the time being about the U.S. economy, including worries about the impact of the trade war and a job market that might be running too hot. Payrolls in June surged by 213,000. That was better than expectations, and almost 40,000 jobs were added to the count of the prior 2 months. But wages rose a modest 0.2% or 2.7% compared to a year ago, easing inflation concerns. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4% as more people entered the workforce but didn't immediately find jobs. Every time the unemployment rate has ticked up since 2010, it's come back down. What happens is people say they're available to work in a single month but don't necessarily have a job, so they're counted as unemployed. But over the next few months, they have tended to find that work.
There's a lot of strength in this jobs report, as there has been in other indicators over the past few months.
But some are concerned it may be too much of a good thing. Economists expect eventually for the U.S. to run out of workers and for wages and inflation to rise as a result.
I do think we're running a risk of overheating the economy. I think we'll move past full employment, and the trade-off between growth and inflation is going to get worse.
And there's the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, to which countries including China and Europe have retaliated. It may be too soon to see the effects, or it may be that right now they're too small to show up. Most economists agree further escalation and retaliation will hurt more, so the effects of future tariffs on the jobs report will be harder to hide, no matter how strong the U.S. economy. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Leisman.
And for more on the nation's employment picture right now, we're joined by our friend Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's Analytics. Always good to see you, Mark. Welcome back.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
If there's a question about the jobs reports lately, it has been about wage growth. With full employment upon us for the most part, such a tight labor market, why aren't wages going up anymore? But you have a slightly different take on that, don't you?
I do. You know, wage growth has picked up. If you go back 2, 3, 4 years ago, wage growth was 1.5% to 2%. Now it's 2.5% to 3%, and it's steadily accelerating. And the really good news is that wage growth for new entrants, folks coming into the workforce, is rapidly accelerating. And I think that's a leading indicator for wage growth more broadly, because businesses, you know, if they have to pay their new workers more, they're going to have to pay all their workers more. So I think it's coming. Just hold tight, Bill. It's coming.
You know, it seems to be kind of feast or famine. For a long time, we were talking about the lack of wage growth. Now we're getting wage growth, and people are talking about it being inflationary. But it doesn't seem to be at that point yet, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, wage growth 2.5% to 3% is very consistent with stable rates of inflation. But here's the issue. You know, we're at a 4% unemployment rate. Job growth is a couple 100,000 per month. Labor force growth is 100,000 per month. So unemployment is going to continue to decline. We're going to go into the mid-3s by this time next year, low 3s by the end of next year. And so at that point, I do think wage growth will be inflationary. So the risk of overheating is rising.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that we just heard Jan Hatzius of Goldman Sachs say that we run that risk of overheating the economy right now, and you'll wonder what the Fed thinks about that. Does this get them to rethink some of their future rate increases?
Well, it's a debate, but I do think the Fed has to normalize interest rates consistently and probably more quickly than they think right now, at least the average Fed member. You know, they are expecting to raise rates a couple more times this year, 3 or 4 times next year. I think that's the very least we will see. I mean, a low 3% unemployment rate. We've only been there 2 other times in history, and both those times we were in the middle of very large wars. So this is very rarefied and risky territory. So I think the Fed's going to have to be aggressive and start raising rates more quickly.
We're going to talk more about this as we continue our program, but the trade wars that were launched basically today, if they continue for some time, what's the economic impact on the job market and the economy overall?
So there's no good in this, none at all. I mean, so far, the tariffs in the grand scheme of things are not going to derail the economy. They're modest. They're going to cost some jobs, but this economy is strong. They won't derail them. But if we continue down this path and we continue to raise the ante, put higher tariffs on more products, and the Chinese and other of our trading partners retaliate, this is going to become a deal. So, this is something that we need to watch very, very carefully. It's now the most significant threat to the economic expansion. Not yet, but the trend lines here do not look good.
Mark Zandi with Moody's Analytics. Always good to see you, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.
And now to that other big story, trade. The gloves came off when the U.S. imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, and China immediately punched back. Eunice Yoon reports tonight from Beijing.
Chinese authorities say that Beijing had no choice but to fend off what it has described as the largest trade war in economic history. The foreign ministry confirmed today that China retaliated with its own tariffs immediately after the U.S.'s move. Customs officials are already collecting duties for 545 items worth $34 billion, matching the amount subject to U.S. tariffs. The targeted products include cash crops like soybeans and cars, and the Commerce Ministry also said it lodged a complaint about the tariffs to the World Trade Organization. The Chinese move only escalates what many fear could become a protracted trade war. President Xi Jinping has not shown signs of wavering, and President Trump appeared to double down on his stance during his visit to Montana, threatening tariffs that could cover all $500 billion of goods imported from China. The Trump administration has said that the tariffs are meant to force Beijing to make changes to its industrial policies and to open its markets. However, many American companies are worried that the tariffs could come at their expense. I've been speaking to AmCham president in China, Alan Beebe, who said that anxiety is running very high among American companies in China. He said regulatory issues like inconsistent interpretation of the rules and unclear laws have been the top challenge for U.S. companies here for the past 3 years. His members fear the barriers will only get worse. Companies, he says, are scrambling to come up with contingency plans, reassessing supply chains, reviewing pricing, and questioning investment plans. He said 23% of his members have already been planning to move manufacturing out of China because of costs. He said that this could accelerate the process. Looking ahead, Beebe said companies are worried about President Trump's threat to hit hundreds of billions of dollars of other Chinese-made goods because more companies would be directly impacted, or as he put it, there are fewer places to hide. Companies here are asking, how long will the trade war last, and how will it all resolve itself? Because there's little sign that the two sides are having meaningful dialogue. For Nightly Business Reports, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
And along those lines, the U.S. trade deficit in May narrowed to its lowest level in 19 months as exports rose to a record. But the deficit with China did increase by more than 18%. America's deficit with the world's second largest economy is the largest imbalance that we have with any country, as has been the case for several decades.
Ford's rut in China is intensifying. The automaker reported a 25% decline in sales in the first half. That's the biggest first-half decline in that country ever. Ford is blaming the lack of new models. Over the years, Ford has invested heavily in the world's biggest auto market. Ford also exports a significant number of cars to China and could take a hit by the Chinese tariffs that went into effect today.
So on Wall Street, as we mentioned, stocks did advance as investors cheered that jobs report, sort of shrugged off the trade concerns. But we did fade a bit at the close. The Dow finished up 99 points to 24,456. NASDAQ gained 101. The S&P added 23. And for the week, all of the major indexes traded higher.
Shares of Biogen saw their biggest percentage gain in more than 14 years. This after the company released positive results on its experimental Alzheimer's drug. The study showed that at the highest dosage, that drug slowed the progression of the disease. And while that is promising, the chairman of the company says there's still more work to be done.
It's not as if we improve the condition or we stabilized even the cognitive decline. We've slowed down the cognitive decline. So it's a first step. It's an extremely encouraging first step, but it's only a first step, and we need to do a lot more.
The stock soared more than 19%, making it the best performing stock on the S&P 500 today.
Time to take a look at some of today's upgrades and downgrades for this Friday. We begin with Apple. Their price target was raised to $210 over at Loop Capital. The analyst cited momentum in its business services and another new iPhone expected to be introduced in the fall. The firm maintained a buy rating on the stock. Shares rose more than 1% to $187.97. Advanced Auto Parts saw its price target raised to $155 at Argus Research. The firm cited the company's ability to reduce costs and improve inventory management. The rating remained the same at a buy. The stock was up about 1% to close at $137.17.
Argus Research also downgraded shares of Carnival Corporation to hold from buy. The analyst cites rising fuel costs, foreign exchange headwinds, and what it calls unimpressive advance bookings. The firm lowered its full year 2018 earnings estimates. Despite the downgrade, though, the stock rose 1% to $57.55. Shares of Gannett were downgraded to underweight from neutral at J.P. Morgan. That is the first sell equivalent rating on that stock in about 2 years. The analyst cites ongoing weakness in print advertising. The price target is $10. The stock closed right around that level at $10.28.
Still ahead, a new type of whiskey sour.
Kentucky bourbon distillers slapped with a 25% tariff from China, and now they're bracing for a trade war hangover. I'm Contessa Brewer in Louisville, Kentucky. I have more coming up on Nightly Business Report.
Elon Musk is sending a team of engineers to Thailand to assist in the rescue of that boys' soccer team trapped in a cave there. The Thai government confirmed that Musk's engineers will arrive tomorrow. They may provide services for location tracking, water pumping, or battery power. The team and its coach were reported missing late last month, as you know. They were found earlier this week deep in a cave where the passageways are narrow and flooded with water.
Satellite company EchoStar drops its bid for a European rival. And that is where we begin tonight's market focus. EchoStar said it won't continue to pursue UK-based Inmarsat after that company rejected a $3 billion takeover offer, saying it undervalued the company. EchoStar shares traded higher by nearly 2% to $46.30. J.P. Morgan is denying a report by a German publication that it's interested in taking a stake in Deutsche Bank. Shares of Deutsche Bank initially rose as much as 6% on the news, but lost half of those gains, finishing up nearly 3% to $11.46. Meanwhile, J.P. Morgan shares were up a fraction to $104.06.
A Washington Post report found that Twitter has stepped up its efforts to crack down on fake accounts. It has suspended more than 70 million accounts just since May. But the Post did point out that the purge could eat into Twitter's monthly active user growth, which is closely watched by Wall Street. Shares were initially lower after that report, but did reverse course and finished up 3.5% today to 46.65. BJ Wholesale's credit rating was upgraded by Moody's after that company used the proceeds from its June 28th IPO to pay down debt. The firm says that the company's operating performance does continue to improve, and shares of BJ's were off a fraction to $23.65.
This week's Market Monitor likes growth stocks with strong dividends. He is Oliver Perchet. He's the chief market strategist at Bruderman Brothers. Oliver, welcome back. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
It sounds like the perfect combination, growth plus dividend, right?
Well, yes, and nothing is ever perfect, especially not in this environment. But, you know, the economy continues to be strong. Mark Zandi, I think, made some very good comments earlier in the program. And, so we like growth stocks, but we also like fortress-like balance sheets, so these mega cap companies, large cap companies. And we always like dividends, in particular companies that have a history of growing their dividends. So that's something that we focus on.
All right. We're going to be hearing some familiar names here from you, starting with FedEx.
Yeah, so FedEx, a great company. They're very well positioned. There's a number of events going on with FedEx, including that, UPS, one of its main competitors, is struggling a little bit. They're facing the potential of a union crisis. You've got President Trump waging a war against Amazon that may drive some business away from the U.S. Postal Service to FedEx and UPS. And then overall, you're seeing a lot more shipments going from online retailers. And that, of course, benefits all shippers. So we like FedEx. It's a strong balance sheet. It's got good growth prospects. The dividend is somewhat low, but we think it's going to rise over time, and that makes the stock attractive to us.
Second pick is Apple, rising dividend and stock buybacks as well.
Yeah, enormous amount of stock share buybacks. As a matter of fact, on that note, first quarter saw the largest amount of share buybacks in history across the board for S&P 500 constituents. Technology led the way there, almost accounting for a third of all share buybacks. Apple has announced significant share buybacks. It's announced dividend raise. It's got lots of cash on hand. And the one thing that is being underappreciated and almost ignored by the market is any potential innovation. It's kind of being looked at as an old, tired company a little bit. We don't think it is, and we think there's a lot of upside here.
And finally, a similar story that you've been telling us, but a different name. This time it's Paychex.
Yeah, Paychex, very, very well positioned. Again, as the economy continues to grow, unemployment continues to drop, more payroll processing, strong growth story. They've been raising their dividends, and we expect that to continue through the year and into next year. And so that is a big positive for Paychex.
Have a great weekend, Oliver. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Crochet with Bruderman Brothers. Bill?
America's whiskey industry is not immune from the trade fight that we've been talking about. It faces a 25% tariff from China on top of those already levied by Europe, Mexico, and Canada. And states like Tennessee and Kentucky that rely the most on whiskey for revenue are getting hit the hardest. Contessa Brewer is in Louisville, Kentucky for us tonight.
At Kentucky Peerless Distilling Company, tourists belly up to the bar to sample sips of bourbon crafted on site. This fifth-generation family-owned business has big plans for growth.
We plan on being in, 6 to 7 countries in the next couple of years, so we're constantly expanding what we do.
But new tariffs are throwing a wrench in the works, or perhaps a bug in the bourbon.
Right now, there's more than $1 billion of investment in Kentucky bourbon, and a lot of that investment is coming to Kentucky because people are very excited about exports.
Fred Minnick wrote Bourbon, the Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of American Whiskey. He says bourbon is the last true signature industry for this state.
When someone thinks of Kentucky, they're not thinking about fried chicken anymore. They're thinking about Kentucky bourbon. And when you start tariffing it, when you start, taking away jobs and hurting it from being exported to Spain, to the United Kingdom, to Mexico, to Canada, to wherever, you're essentially, gut punching the state of Kentucky.
The tariffs won't just hurt the distillers in Kentucky. In this state, more than 17,000 jobs rely in some way on the whiskey industry. Those are grain farmers, the manufacturers of glass and of these barrels. Also, the entrepreneurs who are building their bourbon tourism businesses.
Bourbon is at a critical moment right now.
Caitlin Sulligan and Nicole Stipp launched Matson & Gilman, a luxury tourism company that specializes in bourbon experiences. They worry about the trickle-down effect of tariffs, forcing the big bourbon businesses to contract and potentially putting the small craft distillers out of business.
Damaging bourbon's ability to reach a global audience is immediately going to damage businesses like us trying to attract those tourists.
Brown-Forman owns famous brands like Woodford Reserve, Jack Daniels, and Old Forester. It says China is important to its business. And American whiskey companies are chipping away at Scotch whiskey's dominance there, doubling their Chinese market share in 5 years to 9%. In fact, globally, Kentucky whiskey exports are skyrocketing, up 23% in just a year to $450 million last year. But now, 65% of those exports are subject to retaliatory tariffs. And for tiny distiller Peerless, which has just launched its international business, there's a lot of uncertainty.
I have 2 boys, hopefully they want to be distillers, be 6th generation. So we're not just building this as the next place to sell out to one of the big players. What we do and how we export and how we build this business plan now definitely affects our future.
For now, Kentucky distillers are bracing for whatever hangover a lengthy trade war brings. In Louisville, Kentucky, Contessa Brewer, Nightly Business Report.
Coming up, an entrepreneur designed lampshades that you can grow, and it helped her grow a business. That's tonight's Bright Idea, next.
Here's what to watch for next week. On Monday, President Trump is expected to announce his nominee for the Supreme Court justice, a decision that could impact business, of course. On Tuesday, executives from the world's biggest media and tech companies gather in Sun Valley at the exclusive Allen & Company conference. And on Friday, a number of major banks report earnings, including Dow component JP Morgan Chase. And that's all we're watching for coming up next week.
Well, when we talk about drawing energy from Mother Nature, we usually think about solar or wind. But there are lots of ways to do that. Natural energy can be used to make things as well. And that's how one entrepreneur in Brooklyn, New York, got the bright idea to use energy produced by mushroom roots. Yep, it's called mycelium, to make lampshades. In her Brooklyn design studio, Danielle Trophy is looking for answers to a lot of what-ifs.
What if all of our goods could be made differently?
In 2013, she discovered mycelium, the root of the mushroom. It was being used by Ecovative, a company in upstate New York, to create a packaging material that would be friendlier to the environment than styrofoam. Trophy wondered what else it could do.
I'm in the School of Biomimicry. It's looking at nature's form, function, ecosystem and emulating the deep patterns and principles.
Mycelium are the gray fungus fibers that transport nutrients and water under the forest floor. As they grow and multiply, Trophy learned the mycelium can bind things together. Here, she's using hemp mixed with mycelium to produce lampshades.
This would grow over the course of about 4 to 5 days.
When it comes out of a mold, it dries, and then it's baked.
It kills the living organisms, so it won't sprout mushrooms, it won't spore or create allergens, and it'll basically be a safe, inert material.
It's also lightweight, extremely fire-resistant, and inspired by mushrooms.
The original design, which is this very iconic mushroom light, so it's a table lamp that actually looks like a mushroom, was a jumping off point.
Trophy took her idea to Ecovative, hoping to put their technology into the hands of individual consumers, growing their own lampshades. But as she began to get the word out at trade shows, commercial buyers became her first big customers. The One Hotel Brooklyn Bridge put 130 of Trophy's lampshades in the living room of its fanciest suite.
We wanted it to feel like it was a cloud that glowed really nicely, that invited people to touch.
Wad El-Hadidi is the design director for SH Group at Starwood Capital. Their One Hotel chain features sustainable designs like floors made from reclaimed wood, designs that need large-scale adoption, the kind a 200-room hotel can provide, before they can have a positive impact on both the environment and the bottom line.
Across that number of rooms, it starts to create momentum and starts to impact the industry at scale.
We love to work with commercial projects. We grew all 130 lampshades publicly in a gallery space. Somebody could walk in during that time and watch the growing process and learn about it.
On track to become profitable this year, Trophy was able to stop bartending in 2017, the same year she partnered with Ecovative to introduce a do-it-yourself mushroom lamp called Grow. It costs about $100, a lot less than some of her higher-end lighting. Just add water, And in a few days, you'll have a new lamp. Just because she asked, what if?
You're seeing this next generation of designers that are coming up into the built environment, into product design, that are bringing this ethos and this respect of nature and the finite resources that we have here on this planet.
We can assure you that Danielle Trophy likes to eat mushrooms as well, but she won't tell us what kind of mushrooms are used in the lampshades. That's a heavily guarded secret, as the type and the materials it's mixed with can affect the texture, the strength, and the weight of the finished product. Ecovative is also using mycelium to make biofabricated furniture, building materials, and even leather-like consumer goods.
Fascinating. Finally tonight, a Statue of Liberty stamp could cost the Postal Service $3.5 million. The Postal Service mistook a replica image of the Statue of Liberty for the real thing. The wrong image was used on the Lady Liberty Forever stamp back in 2010 that you're looking at there. The image used was actually the Statue of Liberty replica at the New York Casino in Las Vegas. So now a federal court has ruled that the post office violated the copyright of the replica's artist, and they must pay him damages.
All right, before we go, let's take a final look at the day on Wall Street. The Dow rose 99 points. The Nasdaq gained 101. The S&P 500 added 23. For the week, all of the major indexes were higher. And that'll do it for us tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you again Monday.